Hey guys, welcome to a breakdown of Andor episode 11. The episode starts on Narkina 5, where Cassian and Melshi have escaped the prison and are trying to find a way off the planet. If you remember, in the last episode, there was the big prison break, and they all swam away from the prison, and then the last shot we saw was of those two running on the shore. The two of them end up running into some natives who capture them initially, but then end up helping them go back to Neomos, which is where Andor was initially captured and sent to the prison. On Neomos, he goes back to the hotel to retrieve the credits and other personal items that he stashed. On Ferrix, we find out that Marva, Cassian Andor's adopted mother, has passed away. We saw in previous episodes that she was sick and refusing to take her medicine, and now in this episode, she has passed away. And this becomes one of the main storylines of this episode, which I'll explain a bit further in a minute. We see the locals on Ferrix taking care of her body, and we also see both the Rebellion and the ISB are keeping tabs on the situation. Korv is working undercover in some kind of coffee or drink shop for the ISB, and then Cinta actually works in the same exact shop, but she is for the Rebellion. The ISB officers on Ferrix report back to Dedra Miro at ISB headquarters and tell her what has happened. Dedra says they should allow them to have a funeral, but keep it small and keep watch on what happens. The news of Marva's passing quickly makes its way around Rebel and Imperial circles because Cassian Andor is a person of interest to both parties, and that is his mother. So the ISB wants to allow the funeral to happen because Andor might show up there. Back on Coruscant, Vel comes to visit Clea at the antique shop and tells her the news. I thought this exchange was interesting. Vel is clearly impatient and wants to get to Luthen as quickly as possible, but Clea maintains that fake antique shop persona and tells Vel that she is not following the rules, which are in place for a reason. It almost seems like the antique shop persona is some kind of code, and we'll see that again a bit later in the episode. Vel comes across very brash and arrogant in this scene, saying that she did Aldhani, and asking what Clea has done lately, and it reminded me of the scene in the last episode between Lonnie and Luthen, where Luthen responds to a very similar question with an epic monologue and saying that he has sacrificed everything. Clea says, she doesn't have lately, she has always. She is always balancing the needs of many people, and Vel is just one of them. Then after that, Vel tells Clea the news that Marva died, and Clea says she will let Luthen know. The ISB still has Bix Colleen and is interrogating her to get whatever information they can. She looks terrible and is clearly struggling with the effects of the torture that they are putting her through. The ISB is trying to figure out who Axis is and asks Bix if Anto Krieger is the one who helped Andor get off Ferrix. We don't see a resolution to this little scenario in this episode, but it seems like the ISB is trying to narrow things down to figure out who Axis is. Back on Coruscant, Mon Mothma tells Vel everything that she is dealing with. She explains that she had been withdrawing money in increments and sending it to Luthen to help with the rebellion, and she did that for a while without any trouble, but then a few months back she got word from a banker back home that the Empire might be taking a close look at Chandrillan accounts, so to get everything in order. So Mon did everything she could to do that, to get everything back into her main account, but at the end she was still short 400,000 credits. And she was in the process of getting things in order when Aldhani happened, and now everything is frozen. So she's in trouble because they're going to look at her account very soon, but she does have a solution. Basically, this whole scene sets up a moral dilemma for Mon. She can either refuse Davos Skolden's help and get exposed by the Empire for having missing credits, or, as we learned in the last episode, she can let Davos' son meet her daughter, and then it's heavily implied that the two would probably get married. So her daughter already hates her, so that would likely ruin their relationship forever. Next, one of the officers on Morlana 1 calls Cyril Karn to tell him that Andor's mother has passed away and that Cassian might show up to the funeral on Ferrix. Cyril sneaks out of his mother's house and it would appear that he is heading to Ferrix. So I think what's going to happen in the final episode is that everyone is kind of getting round up and there's going to be this big finale on Ferrix at Marva's funeral. The ISB will be there, Cyril will be there, I think Andor is going to end up there too. The season started on Ferrix and now I think it's kind of going to come full circle and end on Ferrix as well. Luthen goes to meet Saw Gerrera and Saw tells him that he's now in to help Kreegyr at Spellhouse. Saw had initially not wanted to be a part of Spellhouse, but now he's in. Luthen reveals that the ISB knows what's going to happen, and Saw figures out that Luthen has people everywhere, including inside the ISB, so a dilemma is then placed before Saw. He knows that Luthen is willing to sacrifice Kreegyr and his men for the greater good of the rebellion. Basically, they can call Kreegyr off and lose Lonnie, or they can let Kreegyr die and keep Lonnie. Saw tries to avoid the question, but ultimately decides to side with Luthen. For the long-term prospects of the rebellion, it is better to sacrifice Kreegyr and keep Lonnie inside the ISB, which is a source that they've cultivated for a long time. Luthen calls Kleya on the phone after this meeting and proceeds to have a very interesting conversation. To the outside listener, it would appear that they're having a conversation about the antique shop, but if you pay attention, he is speaking in code. He tells Kleya that he agreed one deal, and now he is interested in another piece that could result in the shop closing if they don't get it. So I think the deal he is referring to that he already closed is his conversation with Saw Gerrera. And then the other piece he is referring to is Andor. He talks about how bad it would be if this piece went to another collector. Kleya says that their representatives are already working on it and that his presence would complicate things. So I think Luthen is probably going to end up on Ferrix at the funeral too. The conversation cuts off and an Imperial ship stops Luthen. This is one of my favorite scenes of the whole series. He kind of messes around with the Imperial officers as they ask him questions, and they eventually grab him in their tractor beam. And then Luthen does something pretty awesome. He shoots projectiles backwards and destroys the tractor beam, then fights off the ensuing TIE fighters with his blasters, and actually shoots lasers out of the side of his ship like lightsabers to destroy the rest. So he looks kind of like Darth Maul's lightsaber, except his ship is in the middle. And then to the Empire's astonishment, he jumps to hyperspace. And my jaw literally dropped after this scene. I thought it was so awesome. It shows how slithery Luthen is and how dumb the Empire is. What a scene, man. The episode concludes with Cassian calling Ferrix to send a message to Marva and let her know that he's okay. But he finds out through this call that she has actually passed away. He's pretty sad about this, and he has a conversation with Melshi where they decide to split up and let everyone know what's happening on Narkina 5. But the whole time they're having this conversation, Cassian is clearly distracted. Melshi walks away, and Andor looks off into the sunset, looking all sad. So what an episode. I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't believe when it was over, and I think some of the major themes present in this episode have been present throughout the series, mainly about how hard it is to run a rebellion, that it takes sacrifice and many people will give their lives for a cause they may never see come to fruition. Also, that so many things have to go right and there are lots of close calls. I can't wait for the finale next week, which I think will probably include a wrapping up on Ferrix with all the characters we've seen and kind of preparing us for season 2. Except for Mon Mothma, I think that'll be on Coruscant, and I really don't know what Mon is going to do. It would not surprise me either way. I could see her accepting the deal to save herself and the rebellion, but I also would not be surprised if she declined the deal for her daughter's sake and then lets herself get exposed. After all, in Rogue One, we see that she is all in for the rebellion and on Yavin 4, so maybe she will turn it down. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.